had to copy that copyrighted trailer at the beginning. But hello, YouTube. Hello, everybody. Okay, now let's get the show going. Tonight, our show is going to be about. It's so good to see you all. It's so good to see you all. Hello, Blade Theater Dave. Hello, Scheisler. Hello, Escape the Matrix. Hello, Cloud Topper in early. Eleanor 2000. Good to see you. Great. Great. D Wee. Okay. I think you might be new. I haven't seen you before. Hello. Scheisler, yes. Ethel Mary, hello. Jennifer Ray, hello. Okay, yeah, it's good to see you all. Hope we got a good show for you tonight. Okay, so the show is about the German space program. That was not which you might see where I'm going with this already. So this comes up a lot when we talk about the Apollo program. It's like, well, there were all these Germans in it, and they, they came over after the end of the war, and it's like, yes. Okay, so it becomes like people like to say that, like, well, actually, it's like, yes, we know. And I thought about it. I thought, you know what? I should do a show about that. Let's do it. So I say, yeah, let's do a show. And my first thought was not to call it the German space program. I was using a different word at first, and I used a different word in the title. And you could probably imagine the word. See, I took the word out of the title. I called it. It was the history of the Nazi space program. Right. So, but then I thought, I think that gets you dinged on YouTube if you use that word in your title. I wasn't sure. I think actually because mine's historical, I think it's okay. But it goes through this algorithm, and they decide whether the algorithm decides, and it's not always perfect, So I just decided, because it's for Badlands, that I should be good and just use the word German instead of Nazi space program. See, I'm saying it, and I think it might hurt me on YouTube just to say it, but who cares? I just don't care at some point. I wouldn't care at all, but it's Badlands channel, So I do need to think of that. But you know where I'm going with this show, right? We always talk about this. We always talk about, oh yeah, the Germans really made our space program and all. Yeah, okay. Well, let's lean into that. We're going to talk about the Germans tonight. We're going to talk about the Germans. And by the way, we should note that yesterday was the 40th anniversary of the release of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. 40 years, 4-0, since Ferris Bueller's Day Off was released in theaters. This, what you can see on the screen here, a little appropriate, right? He is doing. Well, he did that lip sync, right, in the German Day Parade in Chicago, right? And they did Dankeschön, however you want to say it. Wayne Newton, a Dankeschön, thank you in German, right? So thank you. And then on screen you're seeing this. They do Twist and Shout by the Beatles, and the Fraulein's really going at it there on the float with Matthew Broderick. So we're all happy that this movie was made, right? I guess. Although I've heard, there's all these theories like he's actually he's a psychopath, or the other one is that he doesn't exist at all, and he's just in the mind of Cameron, just imagines him as an alter ego, So I don't know. There's a good movie, you can do a lot. A great movie, you can do a lot of stuff with it. So Dankeschön for coming by tonight. We're talking about the German space program. Now, this is part one. I think this is good. It's multi-part. Tonight's going to be part one, the early years. And and then we'll do part two maybe next week. I don't know. And maybe part three. Who knows? It's sort of an interesting subject. So I was going to call it the history of the Nazi space program, right? And I figured, that'll get a lot of people be interested in that. And then, like I said, I had to think about it a little bit differently. And so the thing is, okay, there was no German space program. People are going to say. There was no Nazi space program. People are going to say that too. And they're technically right. And by the word Nazi, we're going to use it to mean in reference to Das Deutsches Reich, the German, the Third Reich, right? We're using it as that. We're not going to use it any other way like anybody might use it. We're talking about the actual, Nazi party in the Third Reich, all right? And so they're going to say that, but they're really, in some ways, the German space program really was a space program. It just wasn't called that. It wasn't officially a space program, but in a sense, not only was it a space program, you can think of the German space program in those years of the Third Reich as being humanity's, is part of humanity's space story in a very a non-trivial way. And this is something that's sort of uncomfortable for a lot of people to admit and talk about it, even to this day, because there's all sorts of moral judgments we make when we talk about this period of history and these people. But I'm just going to cover the history of the space history of it today. And if you want to make moral judgments about various people, you're welcome to do that based on your understanding of history. I'm going to sort of steer clear of that and just give you like a straight view of it, you know? Okay. So let's talk about this. The German space program. So let's go back in time. It's 1944. It's June 20th, 1944. 2 days after D-Day. And here's where we're going to pick up the story. But first, before we proceed any further, we do need to say that tonight's episode of Spellbreakers is brought to you in part by Pet Club.
Science proves that a healthy immune system is the body's first defense against the smallest of ailments to the most catastrophic. Coriolus versicolor is the most sought-after, all-natural supplement for both humans and pets to help boost the immune system. There are over 400 studies worldwide on its effectiveness in humans, including Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, MD Anderson Cancer Center, and now from the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine. Together, we can help reverse this terrible tide now plaguing your loved ones and give them the immune-boosting supplements that they need.
And tonight's episode of Spellbreakers also brought to you in part by River Bitcoin.
Your bank kept $1,600 from you in 2025. You probably didn't notice. Now multiply that by millions of Americans. That's over $433 billion in interest the banks kept. Your money goes in. Banks put it to work. They make record profits. You get almost nothing in return. And when they blow up, guess who has to bail them out? So what are you supposed to do? Ask politely? Wait? Accept that this is just how banking works? Or you could put your money where it works for you. On River, your cash earns 3.3%, paid in Bitcoin. Earning Bitcoin gives your money even more room to grow. And it's just as easy as how you bank today. You can get paid, pay your bills, and access your money anytime. Start banking with Bitcoin on River.
Badlandsmedia.tv/river. You will not regret it.
You will not regret it, says our fearless founder, John. Hopeful theorist, Matt would be the Badlander to take down John's CommieTube channel. Hopefully not. I think the worst that could happen was that this video would be demonetized on YouTube, which I don't really care about that much, you know. But I try to play. My motto in life is play by the rules when you can, you know. And that way, when you need to break the rules, which you're going to need to break the rules at some point, you'll be more righteous in doing it because you will have saved. I really believe that works out if you approach life that way, you know. So June 20th, 1944, 2 weeks after D-Day. So June 6th was D-Day, and then 2 weeks after D-Day. This is where we're going to pick up the story. We're in Europe. We're discussing the German space program. So here's the Chicago. Oh, just speaking of Chicago, right? Dankeschön. Here is a lot of German Americans in Chicago, right? The Midwestern. Chicago Daily Tribune from June 20th, 1944. This is page 2. They're right in the middle of the 1944 presidential campaign. Chicago Tribune was a famous Republican rag. It was promoting Wendell Willkie as the nominee to beat FDR for the 4th term, basically. And it's right in the middle of the war, so you can only criticize the president so much. But anyway, that I should have showed the front page because it's sort of fun. But this is the map of the situation 2 weeks after D-Day, the Cherbourg Peninsula of France. So the Allies have made the Americans, Canadians, British have made inroads inland across the Cherbourg Peninsula, and in along the beaches of Normandy. They've got They haven't got the town of Cherbourg yet, but they soon will. So that's where we are. That's where we are. And then the next day, drive on Nazis' inner defense of Cherbourg. So they're able to take Cherbourg really the next day. I think they cleared it out. And so I love this. This was on page 30, that next day, the 21st. Nazi baby tanks taken in tow on French front. So the Nazis had control robots by wire wound on spools. Did you know the Nazis had baby robot tanks that they sent out on spools? I didn't. Evidently, they were not that effective, according to this. You never know in wartime about stuff in the newspaper, whether it's telling you the truth or not. So we're picking up on the 20th, 2 weeks after D-Day, and we're going to this place along the Baltic Sea. So this is a map of the German Reich during World War II. So it's got present-day Germany plus extra territories and annexation of Czechoslovakia and Austria, and East Prussia there too. But the little place that's in circle in red there, we're going to look at that. So on the 20th of June, very far away from the front, we're nowhere near the front lines, we're nowhere near Normandy, but something monumental is going to happen there. Something historic is about to happen there. What's happened there? This is what it looks like up close. This place called Peenemunde. It's along the Baltic Sea coast right there, right there, if you can see it in red, okay? And this is what happens, is a rocket's going to take off. It looks like this. This is not an actual photo of that launch, but it might as well have been. And you got a little wooden hut there. You got the sea in the background. And this is called, this event, MW18014. The rocket is an A4 rocket. I bet that's not what you thought I was going to say. You thought I was going to say something else, did you? But this is there's two things to think about. There's rockets, and then there's weapon systems made from a rocket. And the rocket itself here is the A4. The weapon's going to be called the V2, right? We know that. The V is short for revenge weapon in German, revenge weapon, and so it's revenge weapon 2. And the thing about this rocket, so this is not, by the way, it's not a weapon yet. This isn't going to be launched against England or the Allies or anything like that. This is just a test. They're still testing it here, but this was a special test. This test went up to altitude 109 miles at the apogee. That means the highest point, reached its highest point at 109 miles above the ground, which, because of that, so it just went up and came down. Probably didn't go very far at all. Probably maybe came down into the Baltic. I don't know I didn't read that far about it. They shot it straight up and it came back down as a test, basically just to see how high they could go, right? And it looks something like this. The diagram went up and came back down. 38 miles is, I guess, at 100 miles, it could land 38 miles away, 36 miles away maybe. So not far enough to actually use it as a weapon. But this was just a test. But the thing about the test is it went very far ahead. It was the very first object created by human beings or launched by human beings that went into what we now call outer space. So think about this, the whole history of humanity. And then on June 20th, 1944, we have something like this, and it's going to basically, now the boundary between, we call this the Kármán line. It's the unofficial, there's really no official start of space. It's just the atmosphere trails off in density as you go up. And then it above that is, we can definitely say that's outer space. So the very first object created by human beings, or I should say sent by human beings to actually go above this line, Kármán line, named after a German physicist, by the way, was a rocket like this, and it was sent there by Germany. So Germany wins the race to put something into space. Now, a couple things. It was not orbit. It was suborbital. It was suborbital. And it was, so it just went up and came down. But so did Alan Shepard. We called him the first American in space. So there was no human being on board. It was just a rocket. And there was no animal on board or anything. But it was a thing put up there. You know, we got all excited when we put a satellite up. It orbited the Earth. And we got excited when we put Alan Shepard, a spam in a can in 1961, sent him up, and he came back down like a ballistic trajectory just like this. We got excited about those. Well, this was the first. It's not a human being, and it didn't go into orbit, but the first thing to go into outer space. So Nazi Germany wins that race. They win. Okay. Now, it was meant as a weapon, of course. It was meant as a weapon. For example, if you look at the rocket here, the rocket's designed to go up, and then it was designed to come back down in its entirety. You know, later rockets were going to be like try to boost something up, where we use the rocket and then they discard the rocket and let it burn up in the atmosphere and just put the payload up into space. You know, that's how we sort of think about things now. At this point, is a ballistic missile, what we want the whole thing to come back down somewhere, right? So that's the point. And nose first, and then we have some kind of device that has a payload. So but this one probably didn't have a payload. It might have had a dummy payload for weight. But it was not meant as a rocket. But eventually it's going to be a weapon, right? The V2 weapon. And the first V2 weapon, the first time it was used, just for record, was September 8th, 1944. Now, I don't know if any of the other ones they sent up ever went past the Kármán line. But one was enough, right? So they win. So there's your, there's your space program in a way, right? If you can talk about the history of space programs in space, you got to sort of mention this, right? This going past the Kármán line, that's a thing, right? Okay. So as a weapon, it was first used on September 8th, 1944. So they would launch it from Peenemunde, and then it would land. They launched it from other places too, though. I think it would land in England, and the first one landed in a place called Chiswick, which is outside of London. If you want to see the map, there's Chiswick, the pin in red, so it's upstream on the Thames from London, so London was under constant attack at this point, not from the Blitz, not from the German Luftwaffe, but from what were called V1 rockets, which are cruise missiles. I don't even have a picture of it. I should have put it. You know what V1 rockets look like? They're literally cruise missiles, and they had to be fired from like the coast of France or Holland, though. They couldn't be fired from Germany. Had to be placed up close to the front lines, and so they built launching facilities for cruise missiles along the coast there, so they could strike London. And multiple rounds. They just pummeled. They sent thousands against the London area, and they were pummeled with V1s. People called them doodle bugs because they could hear them coming. But the V2 was different. It was couldn't hear it, and it just snuck up on you. And the first one landed in Staveley Road in Chiswick, and it killed a bunch of people. And Staveley Road, and there's a memorial there now. First V2 rocket memorial. The first V2 rocket on London fell here on 8th of September, 1944, killing 3. All right. It damaged some school, I think, too. It was but the thing is, just having a rocket kill people there, the cruise missiles were doing a lot of damage. You could open up the newspaper back then and just see the notices of the attacks around London, where they were, how many people were killed. So it's like, here is the newspaper from about a week later, the Horncastle Target, Saturday, September 16th, 1944, borough of Brentwood and Chiswick. In the borough of Brentwood and Chiswick, I thought this was about the V2 attack. It's not. I'll mention that. 13 bombs fell around Chiswick and Brentford. So they mean 13 V1 cruise missiles. 8 people were killed, 110 injured. The most serious incident was at Clay Ponds, Brentford, among schools. Damage were Chiswick Polytechnic. Okay, so it's unclear to me if this has anything to do with the V2 rocket or this is just normal V1 rockets. I couldn't figure that out because here's the thing: is I went looking. I figured, oh, this was the first V2. I'll go look in the newspapers from that time and find out a notice about this historic event. September. Of course, there was nothing about the June 20th reaching space one because it's a military secret. The Germans aren't going to publish it, and there's a war going on. And likewise with the V2 attack, it was like, I couldn't find anything in the U.S. newspapers about Chiswick, and it's like nothing. There's nothing explicit about it in the British newspapers from then too. It's like, well, that's odd. And then I realized, well, duh. They're not gonna talk about this. If people saw something coming that they couldn't hear, like and it was a larger explosive, and maybe they could see that it was a rocket or something like that, are the British going to go and say this weird thing rocket fell on these exact coordinates outside of London? It's like you're doing spotting work for the Germans, right? You don't do that. You're not going to talk about this at all as being anything different than what's already been, because all these other places they're attacking, they can't really tell what bombs fell on what, maybe as much. So the spotting work for the V1s maybe not so important, but if they get exact bearing on where that V2 landed, that's going to be helpful to them, right? So they're not going to supply that information. So it was dumb to think of. So the V2 is a product of the A4 rocket, we should say. The A4 rocket, because we're talking about rockets here, is a product. Yes. So here's our forbidden page, our forbidden slides. Das Deutsches Reich, the German Reich, from 1933 to 1945, used the infamous flag with the Hakenkreuz. That's what will get you in trouble. The Hakenkreuz, which in German means the hooked cross. The hooked cross, also the swastika, but swastika can be any orientation, and the Hakenkreuz is a specific version of it. And then there's also other crosses and flags. So the Wehrmacht, the Wehrmacht is that was the German armed forces during the war. Was the Wehrmacht. It means the defense force. So it's like how we made a Department of Defense after the war. A unified thing. The Germans made that during the war. They had a unified version where they unified the Army, Navy, and the burgeoning Air Force into one thing, called it the Wehrmacht. And the flag there, of course, it has the Hakenkreuz on it, but it also has the Tatzenkreuz, which is Tatzenkreuz is or in the French, la croix pâtée. In French, it means the cross with paws, like claws, like it's an animal's paw, and that's what Tatzenkreuz means. The same thing in German. It's because it has those flared out ends. That's the Tatzenkreuz, and so that was used in the Middle Ages by the Teutonic Knights, and it's still used today in the German army. By the way, it's so some people call it the Iron Cross. Yeah, there's nothing controversial about it because it's still used today for the German army, the Bundeswehr, the German armed forces. So, but maybe the version with black on white, that's bad. There's also the Balkenkreuz, which is the beamed cross, which is in World War II. You started to see this, which is it's straight. It's just a straight beamed cross right there, and they had all sorts of different versions of that. So that's a Wehrmacht, and then we have Deutsches Heer, the German army. Die Kriegsmarine, the War Navy, die Luftwaffe, the air weapon. We've all heard of the Luftwaffe. So the V2 rocket program, the V2 weapons program, of course, is being done by the Wehrmacht, by the Deutsches Heer, by the German army. So I was going to show you the Ryan view of the rocket. So that's who's doing this. So there's no space program per se. This is about making a weapon, but the people involved in it, I think one of the reasons you can call it the space program, the German space program, is because the people involved in it very much thought about it in terms of as a step to going to space. They were very much interested in that. They were fascinated, obsessed with it. And so they were the people running the weapons program. Yeah, it was being done by the army, as a weapon. And yes, some of them were Nazi Party members that were doing this. And some were not just Nazi Party members; they were believers in Nazism. And we'll explain that. We'll explain. In fact, the greatest German rocket scientist of all time was a believer in Nazism, and I'll explain why. So, and I'm using Nazism to mean the particular version from the Third Reich, not whatever people want to bullshit. Fascism, fascism is a term that communists use for anybody who disagrees with them. That's all fascism is. It includes Nazis, but everybody's a fascist now to the left, right? And the communists, right? Anybody who opposes communism is a fascist. So the new German, since after the war, the Bundeswehr replaced the Wehrmacht, and it uses the padded cross, the paw, the cross with the paws, so it's still okay, I guess, but it's sort of blue and white. Looks a little, it's much less threatening, right? It's nobody's really afraid of these symbols, are they? Yeah, that's the point. It's like, no, we're a harmless armed forces. We would only hurt you if we really, really, really had no choice, is what it's saying. Don't you think? Yeah, that's what it's saying. Anyway, now let's go back in time. So that was 1955. The Bundeswehr was founded because they disbanded the German armed forces after the war for a while. And so 1955. Let's go 50 years in the past from that. 50 years in the past. Jules Verne dead at his Amiens home. So that's northern France. Jules Verne dead March 25th, 1905. All right. This is the Democrat Chronicle from Rochester, New York. So it shows you that even if in upstate New York, front page news, that Jules Verne, the French author, is dead. Jules Verne was maybe he was the most famous Frenchman after Napoleon, I would say, to people at the time. He was a very famous man, very famous author, right until his death. It's so much so that as he was dying, people were reporting on it, and then and so. It says even the Jules Verne is dead. Jules Verne died at 10 minutes past 3 this afternoon. So even when you're really famous, they could put down the exact time of death. And Jules Verne dying. So here we're going to learn the genesis of the German European space program. The whole thing. Jules Verne. Jules Verne is dying of diabetes 3 days earlier. So the fact that he's being celebrated. Council Bluffs, Iowa newspaper. From the day he died, Jules Verne, a prophet without honor in his own country. I didn't read this. I don't know why he's not without honor. So he'd written dozens and dozens of books at the time of his death. Most of which, the famous ones you've probably heard of, and the ones I read are from his early part of the career. So his first novel. So all these were in French originally, but they were widely translated very quickly especially into English, German, Italian, and so 1863. So this is during the American Civil War. 5 weeks in a balloon, which actually 5 weeks in a balloon starts right in the middle of the Civil War. It starts right in the middle of Confederate Virginia, I think. There's a bunch of Yankees escaping a Confederate prison camp with a balloon. So Verne was fascinated by America. He was really fascinated by the United States. You could really tell he saw the future of civilization in the United States. All right, so 1864, Journey to the Center of the Earth. Oh, by the way, so we got I got a Rumble rant from NV Runner, $5. Thank you, NV Runner. That's really cool. Thank you. All right, so yeah, Verne wrote dozens of books. 5 weeks in a balloon, Journey to the which I've read. 5 weeks in a balloon. I read Journey to the Center of the Earth. Oh God, that's scary. All the thing about all of Jules Verne's books is they're really horror. They're horror. They put you through hell as the reader. Anybody who's read Jules Verne knows what I'm talking about. They put the characters in extreme danger that it's like, I don't even want to read another page of this. Like Journey to the Center of the Earth, when they're like trapped below the earth and they got to get back to the surface. And it's like, oh my gosh. And it's that in Lord of the Rings, when they get lost in the mines of Moria, That's like child's play compared to this for Jules Verne. The Children of Captain Grant. So now we're after World War II. 1969, probably his most famous one, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It's about Captain Nemo, the submarine. Again, also very terrifying scenes in that, where the characters are just pressed to the limit of survival. Around the Moon. Okay. From the Earth to the Moon, 1965, and Around the Moon. So those are the two ones. He's going to imagine, he's going to write really the first science fiction novel about traveling to outer space. And so there's all sorts of other ones. Around the World in 80 Days. I read that too. I read that in French in high school, actually, in French class. Anyway, dozens and dozens, and even once published after his death in 1905. Super famous, super influential. So here's the thing. If you were a young man, a boy, maybe girls too, but especially the boys, and you were German, you were French, you were Italian, you were British, and you were born around the turn of the century, it would have been very common for you to have read many Jules Verne novels and to really get into really science fiction. He was so prescient, but he wasn't just a science fiction writer. He was really concerned about realism. So, oh, by the way, this is time to read this. Yeah, why not? In some ways, we're talking about Germany. In some ways, we're talking about all of Europe, because the trend is going to be towards European unification. And then the whole Nazi idea was about building a European empire an empire of the European nations, right? I want to read this because this little passage, this will show you how much our perceptions of Europe have changed since the time Jules Verne was writing his moon travel novels. I remember the novel. So this is what I asked ChatGPT. I went to ChatGPT because I was thinking of something. I told it, I remember the novel The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. It's really the world's first detective story. It's British. It's a great novel. I love it. Listen to the audiobook. It was so creepy. In The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins, there is a passage that characterizes the stereotypes of the British, French, and Germans and Italians. So this is 1868, this was written. The British are characterized as practical, inventive business types. The French as rationalists and thinkers. The Germans as sentimentalists and idealists, and the Italians as artistic. So the French are logical and thinkers. The Germans are sentimentalists, idealists. And ChatGPT says, yeah, that's essentially right. The stereotypes that Collins puts into the mouth of a character are roughly English, practical, businesslike, energetic, inclined towards action. The French were logical, analytical, and rational. That was the stereotype of the French. Logical, analytical, and rational. The German stereotype of the German was one who was sentimental, speculative, philosophical, idealistic. In the Italian, the stereotype was artistic, aesthetic, and emotionally expressive. So what do you think about those? Does those sound like the ones you're familiar with? Because they sound like there's been a little bit of a migration in the stereotypes among these nations to some degree. ChatGPT. So your memory was quite close. The French are associated with reason and analysis. The Germans with sentiment, metaphysics, and idealism. The Italians with art and beauty, and the English with practical affairs and getting things done. All right. So that's from exactly the same time that Jules Verne is writing, a Frenchman, and he really, above anybody else, is going to epitomize a certain type of rationality, empiricism, and belief in science. Very French of that era, very French. And so his novel in 1865, De la Terre à la Lune, trajet direct de 97 heures et 20 minutes. From the Earth to the Moon, direct route in 4 days, 1 hour, and 20 minutes. So he wrote that novel, and you can see there's a lithograph, you can see the screen. Basically, it's about the first moonshot, the first manned mission to the moon, and he imagines it's done at some point in the future, and he imagines it's going to be done by the Americans. Verne thinks the Americans are going to do it first, and they're going to do it from Florida. They're going to go to the moon from Florida, from Tampa. He put it on the other coast. but he put it in Tampa. And basically, what they're going to do is climb in a big shell and inside of a giant gun. So it's a gun club, the Baltimore Gun Club, that does this in his novel. It's crazy. But he has the Americans, the Baltimore Gun Club, builds a giant cannon and shoots a shell, and it's got people in it. And he shoots the shell with enough speed that it leaves Earth's orbit and goes all the way to the moon, circles around it, and comes back. And then splashes down in the Atlantic Ocean. All right. So there's Jules Verne in 1865, 100 years before the Apollo program, uncannily coming up with some interesting details, right? So I asked ChatGPT, I said, so that's Verne imagines 4 days, 1 hour, and 20 minutes. So Artemis 2, I noticed the Artemis mission took about 4 days to reach the moon, and ChatGPT says, yes, you're right. It's just about, Apollo 11 only took 3.2 days, and Apollo 8, which was basically that whole idea of going and circling the moon, it took about 3 days, but 3 to 4 days, yeah, that's about right. So Verne actually got that right. But here's the cool thing about Jules Verne, is that he didn't just guess that, oh, that sounds reasonable. He actually did his homework. He actually acted like a mathematician and found out what it probably would be. So I said, yeah, 4 days is pretty close, Jules Verne, from the Earth to the moon. I said, and ChatGPT said, well, that's a fascinating historical coincidence. It's striking that Verne got several other broad features, surprisingly close. Launch takes place in the southeastern United States, in Florida. 3 crew members make the journey, like in Apollo. The spacecraft splashes down. The mission involves a flyby of the moon rather than landing. In the sequel, so there was a sequel he made, and so anyway, and they do land on it in the sequel, but the 1865 is they go around it. Here's the cool thing. The reason Verne's travel time ended up being so close is that he took the physics seriously. This is the spirit of the age. This is the spirit of the age that the kids in Germany are growing up that are going to do the V2 program. They're growing up in the spirit of this age. They're reading Jules Verne, and they're doing it in this sense that they took the physics seriously. Verne consulted contemporary scientific sources and worked through the distances involved. Once you know the Earth-Moon distance, then you can figure it out, basically. I said, who were they, these people? And he threw out a couple names. One was Verne's cousin, who was a mathematician. Verne consulted with him to figure this out. But he also consulted with Joseph Bertrand, one of France's leading mathematicians of the 19th century, and a member of the Académie des Sciences. So that's basically as high ranking as you get. The French take very seriously these kind of hierarchies of knowledge, and it's very French to do that even now. All right, so other stuff. Bertrand, here he is. Here's that French mathematician he consulted with. One of the great mathematicians of the 20th century. Okay, worked in differential geometry, probability theory, economics, thermodynamics. Came up with Bertrand's theorem. He was just the latest, and this is the thing about France too, is he was just in the latest of. See, we thought we were just going to talk about Germany. We're talking about France and Germany together, in a way. Is that Bertrand was just one of a long line of French mathematicians and physicists and engineers going back over 100 years that really took the lead in developing physics as we know it. People think in physics we use Newton's laws to work out mechanics, and it's true to some degree, but really we use a different version of them that was developed a century after Newton by a guy in France, Joseph Lagrange. He was actually Italian, but he moved to France as a young man, and he became a Frenchman, became a French citizen. And so Lagrange, we use Lagrange's mechanics in physics. If you don't know about Lagrangian mechanics, we call it Lagrangian mechanics. If you don't know about it, you don't really know classical mechanics. And also there was Pierre-Simon Laplace, Mécanique Céleste, celestial. He wrote the most giant treatise on celestial mechanics about how to calculate orbits. All right. So, and Bertrand did work. He did calculating orbits. He figured out a theorem about orbits and the inverse square law of gravitation. That basically it has to be 1/r squared exactly if you want to get orbits that close two-body orbits that close in on themselves instead of just making a spirograph kind of thing. It has to be exactly 2. He proved mathematically, which is pretty cool. And this is a numerical simulation you can go to see on Wikipedia. So all very French. And you could in Bertrand's ballot, he has a theorem about ballots. It's very interesting that it has to be used in detecting voter fraud, and then we get all into that. I have to revisit that. Okay, but here's the thing about Verne, about Bertrand, and about the guys that are going to be in the German space program. What's interesting is that Verne was not merely asking scientists for a few facts. So he asked his friends, the new celestial mechanics, to give him the values, like how fast to fire, what was the muzzle velocity of the gun? 11,000 miles per hour, basically. So no, 11,000 meters per second. Excuse me. He got that value from his friends. He was operating in a period when educated readers expected numerical realism. From the Earth to the Moon contains page after page of discussions of projectile mass, cannon dimensions, velocity, launch location, orbital geometry. Modern readers sometimes find those sections dry, but in 1865, they were part of the attraction. People wanted that. The novel was marketed almost as a scientific thought experiment. So that was the spirit of the age. Late 19th, such optimism about technology and the future, the rational future of humanity. All right. Also, when the Eiffel Tower was built, right around the time, as a celebration to French engineering, right? So Jules Verne. There was also H.G. Wells wrote The First Men in the Moon, but that was later. That was about 1901. So, 40 years after Verne was writing his novels. So, okay. So now let's talk. So then we got the. All right, good. We got time. We're gonna get to the man of the night. So we haven't talked about any Germans yet, really, have we? So let's talk about a German. We talked about their rocket, but let's talk about now the origin of how Germany got involved in all this. So we're going to talk about a guy who's going to be a fan of Jules Verne, and lives in the spirit of that. That was very important to talk about the spirit of the age of numerical realism. See, I don't think we have numerical realism now. We don't really have it. We have something else. We have postmodern numerical realism. We just want, like, if we're watching a Star Trek episode or science fiction show, we just want the character, when they say it, to sound like they mean it. That it must be realistic, like from the looking in the mind of the character saying it. Like when Data says that it's going to take like such and such warp speed to reach you need to say it with a conviction, like this is a real thing. And I believe that, so the actor's job is to do that, right? So we need actor realism today, but we don't really care if the underlying numbers are correct. It's like, actually, that would not be fast enough to get to Aldebaran. That's what we think of people as being dorky if they do that. The late 19th century and early 20th century was the golden age of dorks. It was of squares with slide rules, slide working out problems for the rational advancement of humanity. That was the spirit of the age. And it's low, we live in a different age. People just had more concentration back then. Part of it is they didn't have anything else to do but sit around, work through tables of numbers with slide rules. People could concentrate more on that kind of stuff back then. We're so distracted now. But anyway, let's talk about a guy who was born in 1894. It's the area in red that you see there. So this is the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the time. And the part down there, that corner of the Austro-Hungarian Empire was part of the Kingdom of Hungary. And it was a region called Transylvania, which is now part of Romania. And there were Hungarians that lived in Transylvania. There were some Romanians, but there were also a bunch of Germans. They were called the Transylvanian Saxons. And they had their own language, Transylvanian Saxon language. There's the Lord's Prayer I put up on screen. Foto also die daust best im Himmel, compared to the regular German, normal German, whatever. Vater unser im Himmel, geheiligt werde dein Name, dein Reich komme, dein Wille geschehe, wie im Himmel so auf Erde. So you can see it's different. It's different, but it's recognizably German. They have their own, and they've been living there for centuries, the Transylvanian Saxons. And so the guy we're talking about was a Transylvanian Saxon. He was born in modern day Romania. So here's the German-speaking region of the Kingdom of Hungary and the Austro-Hungarian Empire around that time, the Transylvanian Saxons. They often the quaint towns you think of in that area, those were Transylvanian Saxons towns. So they were Germans. There's that young woman there. She looks pretty German, and German ethnicity. But they lived in the midst of a bunch of Hungarians in Transylvania. And this is the guy that we're going to talk about. This is the man of the night. This guy is the German space program in one man. It's Hermann Oberth. Hermann Oberth was born June 1894, so 50 years to the month before that first A4 rocket is going to reach into space. He was born. And he died in 1989, which is amazing. December 1989, he lived. So he lived to a very ripe old age. Pretty cool. He lived past the fall of the Berlin Wall, past the overthrow of Ceausescu, the Romanian dictator. So who was the last to go. Amazing life this guy had. And you can see him there. There he is as a young child, 7-year-old boy. And then in the 1930s, and then in the 1950s, Hermann Oberth. All right. An interesting detail is that Oberth's criticism of Jules Verne is highly specific. He admired the novel, but he realized the cannon launch. So he said, Jules Verne had him being launched by a cannon. So it would subject the travelers to thousands of G's of acceleration. Verne had correctly recognized many aspects of a lunar mission: crew compartment, launch from Florida, ocean splashdown, and a voyage lasting 17 years. But the propulsion method was physically impractical. Oberth's attempt to fix that flaw helped steer him towards the rocket equation. The rocket equation, you learned that in basic physics. It's called the rocket equation, and the engineering problems that would define his career. Rocket equation is a version of Newton's laws where you have variable mass, because the idea is the rocket's getting lighter as it burns its fuel. So when you talk about the mass m in an equation, it's actually going down. Okay, so Oberth later remarked that Verne did not merely entertain him. Verne set Oberth on the path that led to astronautics. Few novels can claim such a direct influence on the development of an entire field of terminology. So from Verne's novel to Oberth reading it as a boy, and he memorized Verne's novels. He was really obsessed with them. He memorized them, and he worked through the numbers in them. And he's like, well, I know how to find the real numbers all on my own, and I can fix them. So he set out basically to turn Verne's novels into an engineering problem. This is so German. You're German, it's the French or the logical, rational mathematicians. Well, with German, well, we can outdo you. We're gonna turn this into an engineering problem. And he did. He spent his whole life. So he was born in 1894. He constructed his first model rocket as a school student at age 14. After becoming obsessed with Jules Verne, he began studying medicine in Munich. In 1914, he's drafted into the Imperial German Army and assigned to infantry battalion, and he's sent to the Eastern Front. But they figure out that he's worth more than just being in the infantry. He moved to a medical unit in Transylvania, his home among the Transylvanian Saxons. And there he found just during the war, he was able to conduct experiments concerning weightlessness, which I have no idea what that means. I tried to find more details about that, and I didn't. I could have asked ChatGPT, but I didn't. I'll have to ask it what it means by that. And later resumed his rocketry designs. So he's doing rocketry on the side. And at that point, there were solid rockets, had solid fuel engines. They had solid, like if you'd use Estes rockets when you were a kid, those were solid, But solid fuel, there's a problem with it, is you can only go so high. Anyway, 1917, he showed designs, this is Oberth, of a missile using liquid propellant with liquid propellant. This is a design of one with liquid propellant with a range of 290 kilometers, 180 miles, to Hermann von Stein, the Prussian Minister of War. Okay, so that's pretty serious. So 1917, how old is he then? 23 years old, and he's still in the army, and he's showing his design for a liquid propellant. So we talk about why liquid propellant is so important. So we'll get to that here. Liquid propellant. So liquid propellant, the idea why it's so important. So Oberth didn't build a liquid propellant rocket. He just had a design for it because everybody knew that's what you needed for serious rocketry more than the solid one. So in 1903, a Russian guy, this guy comes into the story. Here's the Russians come in. Tsiolkovsky, the great father of Russian rocketry. So there's three fathers of rocketry, and we just met two of them. Hermann Oberth, German, Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, Russian, and the third one we're going to meet in a minute. And guess where he's from? So 1903, the exploration of cosmic space by means of reaction devices. So he basically says the only practical way of reaching space is by rockets, but that is going to require speeds much greater than what we can do right now. And really, to get those high performance ones, we're going to need to liquid fueled rockets. And there's even a bigger reason for that, which is that Oberth is going to figure out, which is that if you're going to go into space, space they knew was a near vacuum, and there'd be nothing. There'd be the rocket couldn't. How would it go? With solid rocket, it didn't know how to. It would just burn and go. They didn't know the rockets wouldn't work. They needed, because they wouldn't ignite. They couldn't burn. You see, without oxygen, you need oxygen for something to burn. So what they figured out was that if you have liquid fuel, you can burn it and you mix it with oxygen that you take along with you. You take along the oxygen with you and you mix it in with the liquid fuel, which you really can't do with the solid fuel. Well, you'd have to mix it in with the solid fuel. It doesn't work. So you need the liquid fuel. You need to atomize it, mix it in with the liquid oxygen, and then it will burn even in the vacuum of space. So that's what so Oberth is going to be the one that figures that out, I think. So Oberth, once 1919, so they knew this from Tsiolkovsky that they needed liquid fuel. And that's his goal now. He's going to have a liquid-fueled rocket. So he goes to Germany, studies at Göttingen, where Oppenheimer is going to eventually be at a little after him. He has a thesis. He does his thesis on rocket science, his doctoral thesis, and it was rejected. It was like, you're crazy. This is not going to work. You're talking about space travel. He was talking about going to space and needing liquid fuel rockets to go to space, and also needing multi-stage rockets. The other thing that Oberth figured out, he was the first one to figure out that you needed multi-stage rockets, which is that you needed a rocket that would get. What you could do is it goes to the variable mass thing. As the rocket lifts off, and then eventually it's empty. It's empty, and you just want to get rid of it. The part it's you just jettison part of it and drop off, and then you've got a lighter rocket, and then you could go even farther, and you're going to need that if you're going to get up to the speed to go into orbit. Oberth figured that out. He determined that. And so now we know we need liquid fueled rockets because we burn in space. We need multi-stage liquid rockets if we're going to go to space. So Oberth is running a space research program by himself at this point. So this is the space program. Oberth, this is how humanity starts its space program in a way, is Hermann Oberth, inspired by Jules Verne, to turn Jules Verne's ideas into reality as an engineering problem. So he does, they throw him out of the doctoral program. He has to go back to Romania, to Cluj, which is the capital of Transylvania, and there they let him defend his doctoral dissertation and they give him a doctorate. But he's really pissed off. He's pissed off at the Germans, their education system. He said the German education system was like a car, but its headlights were very dim, but it had very bright lights facing backwards so they could see where they were coming from, and they were obsessed with the past instead of the future. That was his his criticism of the German education system. In 1923, his thesis is published, and this is where it changes history. It's really the first rocket science manual, and it's called Die Rakete zu den Planetenraumen, the rocket into planetary space. And he makes a serious scientific argument for something that most physicists and engineers regarded as fantasy, space travel. So he basically gives this, it's the rocket, it's not just rocket science, it's rocket science for space travel. How would you go to space in rockets? He basically figures the bulk of the important stuff out right here and publishes it in 1923, right after World War I. And here's a copy of it. You can get a contemporary version, as you can see on the screen. It had a lot of great diagrams of the kind of payloads you could send up there, including ones that could support life, people. See, he knew about the fact that he knew that the gun idea in Jules Verne was bogus, because it would kill everybody through the extreme acceleration. So this is why that's another reason why you need a multi-stage rocket. You actually can't blast people out at escape velocity, or you'll cremate them right in their capsule. You have to go up and then jettison loose part of the rocket, and then have the boosters fire and get up to the really fast speed you would need to achieve orbit. He figured that out. And he published all that in 1923. And it is rocket science. Then something happens which is amazing. So we're at 7:05. 7:05. Here comes America. America enters the picture. Not just in the Jules Verne novel. So 100 years ago in March, we didn't celebrate this, but we should have celebrated this. 100 years ago in March, just 3 months ago, the first successful launch of a liquid-fueled rocket. So now humanity has this technology that will allow us to go to space. And that was done by Robert Goddard, American, born October 5th, 1888. October 5th is my birthday too. So Robert Goddard is like the most famous person born on my birthday. So good on you, Bobby. All right. So I'll wish you a happy birthday when it's my birthday too. But 100 years ago, this little thing he sent up, first liquid fuel, very small, didn't go to space. It went up a couple hundred feet, but it was just testing out the technology. Look, you got to start small, right? So Robert Goddard, American, first to do that, and he had published in 1919 an article, A Method for Reaching Extreme Altitudes, which is basically the same kind of research that Oberth is doing, figuring out what you would need. And it wasn't as thorough as Oberth's, but it was the same kind of thing. But he was the first one to actually make that kind of rocket happen. Goddard's March 1926 launch is the moment where rocketry transitions from being mostly theory and experimentation into the technological path that ultimately leads to spaceflight and to the moon. So there you go. Goddard that steps into the reality. Oberth is like going to make the engineering, turn Jules Verne into engineering reality. An American, Robert Goddard, is going to turn it into real reality with a rocket. Then the next year, Goddard's experiment just blew everybody's mind, and from then on, it was like, yeah, we're going to space. We're going to space, everybody. And nowhere did this take off more than in Germany, among the young men and old men of Germany. And there was the Society for Space Flight was founded, the Verein für Raumschifffahrt. So Raum is space. It's like roominess, Raum. So Verein für Raumschifffahrt, ship travel, spaceship travel, Society for Spaceship Travel, VFR, founded in 1927. And it was, so Hans Oberth he didn't found it, but he'd be a big part of it. And it was founded by a couple guys in Berlin, and they published it was like popular science. They published speculative ideas about how you could get spaceflight. One of the founders was a guy named Max Valier, and he had been involved in the creation of the rocket car company Opel in the 1920s, which the Germans were very keen on making rocket cars, a rocket sled on rails, as they say. And so that's, and by then Oberth's pretty famous because of his book. His book was such a it just blew everybody open. First rocket science textbook is he publishes. And then he publishes, he updates it after Goddard. Now they know a lot more stuff. He updates it. And this is really the one that really is going to be very influential. It was published in 1929, the third edition. He changes the title, Wege zur Raumschifffahrt, so the way to space travel. And he 29 is, of course, the start of the Great Depression. So keep that time. I love the cover there. Look at that cover if you can see it. It's very German expressionist. It's very of that time, right? How cool is that? And you can look. It's online. You can go see his text. So he wins the first international prize for space sciences in Paris, of course. Where else would you give out that? And is awarded to Oberth for the publication of this second edition of this book. This becomes the definitive textbook for rocket science. Is this 1929 third edition? But I just noticed that cover reminded me so much of German expressionism in the 1920s. It reminded me of the Metropolis, the movie, which we saw a clip from at the beginning. We saw a trailer for the release of 1927's Metropolis by Fritz Lang. And it's got that aesthetic, that German expressionist aesthetic. And if you're talking about the early German space program, you're going to talk about, you got to mention this aesthetic. But it goes deeper than that. I didn't realize how deep this goes. There's a big connection between Hans Oberth and Fritz Lang, who made Metropolis, and also with Thea von Harbou, Fritz Lang's wife, who wrote the book Metropolis, on which this was Fritz Lang based his movie. So there's them pictured at the bottom of the screen. That's Fritz Lang and Thea von Harbou in the 1920s. She was very, very pretty woman. So you can see that's the same aesthetic, but it goes deeper than that. Hermann Oberth knew them. They were close collaborators and friends, and so Fritz Lang wanted to make a movie eventually about the first woman on the moon in 1929. He goes to Oberth and says, "Can you help me as a technical advisor?" So in the 1929 version of Oberth's textbook on rocketry, he dedicates it to Thea von Harbou and Fritz Lang. Nobody said that in any article. I just started reading the Oberth's book, and I just go, boing, okay, well, there's your connection. No wonder they all look like. So there's Metropolis, So here's the thing about Metropolis. They reissued Metropolis. I went to see it with my dad when he was still alive. We walked over to the theater. It was such a great thing. No, it was downtown Fort Collins. A really great memory with my dad, going to see Metropolis on his birthday. I think his 70th birthday. It was playing. And it was a great movie. It's a great movie. It was the restored version. So they released it in 1927, and then for Americans, they chopped it up and they basically made it into a different movie. So what they did is they restored Fritz Lang's original version, and American audiences finally got to see the original version of Metropolis. I think I want to say 2010, 2012, maybe 2010, because I think my dad was 70. Okay. And I can tell you that, some people claim that Metropolis is, well, they would say it's fascist propaganda. And Thea von Harbou's novel is fascist propaganda. And then and I have to say that after I saw the restored version in the theater of Metropolis in 2010, my impression of the movie, I had a movie blog at the time. I was writing about every movie I saw. And I saw this and I wrote a blog article about Metropolis. And I didn't say what I'm about to say now, which is totally. It's not fascist propaganda. Fascist is the incorrect word. Fascist is just the word for what communists call their enemies, which includes Nazis. It is certainly a movie that after I saw it, I think I finally understood National Socialist Nazi ideology on its own terms, like what they wanted to think they were doing, how they viewed themselves. I think Metropolis greatly reflects that. It's even at the end. So it's about a sort of a dystopic industrial futuristic world. And it's saying, how can we avoid this? How can we avoid this? And part of the big dystopia is the complete absence of the true feminine. There's a false feminine that's put forward, the robot feminine, with moves in sexual moves that jerk around and drive men into a frenzy instead of the true feminine. So it's about the loss of the authentic feminine, and to restore order in society. And so the hierarchy at the top of society gets completely cut off from the base of society, and the people are suffering in their industrial conditions, and they have to reunite the head of society and the hands of society. Okay, 7:15. Oh, we're fine. We're going to wrap up here. The mediator between head and hands must be the heart. So the son of the tycoon is able to unite but he's only able to do that because of the restoration of the authentic feminine. The real flesh and blood woman shows up and destroys the robot just by her presence as a woman. Okay, so I think it really reflects National Socialist Nazi ideology. I think Fritz Lang, yes, definitely. So Fritz Lang made in the novel does, and it's not so. Thea von Harbou was a Nazi Party member. Not only was she a Nazi Party member, she was a believer in. She was not just a party member because you had to be. She believed in the Nazi ideology as being the thing, and she hated Jews and she wanted to kill Jews. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about how the Nazis viewed themselves. What was their view of why they were building the society they were building? It's reflected in Metropolis. Okay, deal with that. That's just how they thought of themselves. What they were doing is building a better society that avoided the hellscape that you would have without a certain kind of idea. You can hate them and say they were evil or whatever you want. I'm fine with that. But let's just deal with, can we just say that this is what they thought of themselves? Because I think it is. And you got to see the restored version of Metropolis. I think it really does. It really does. So Fritz Lang then made From the Earth to the Moon Frau im Mond, Woman in the Moon. He just loved Thea von Harbou, you can tell. Woman in the Moon, from the novel by Thea von Harbou, Woman in the Moon. And it involves a multi-stage rocket. So now we got that. It has a countdown before launch. It's the first movie that had a countdown before launch. So this is a countdown, 10, 9, started in this Fritz Lang movie. And this is the one that Oberth serves as the consultant for. And serious attempt to depict space travel as engineering rather than fantasy. Okay, so now it's become art again. We went from art in a novel into engineering manual and then to reality with Goddard. And now it's become art again as cinema. Yeah, it just blows your mind. And it's got the aesthetic. Here is a post. We got time to read this. Yeah, this is fun. Some people, it's like, no, Fritz Lang wasn't a Nazi. His mother was Jewish, a Jewish convert to Christianity. So here's from a lefty Christianity subreddit. It's saying, Fritz Lang was a Nazi. Metropolis is fascist propaganda. I said it's not. It's Nazi propaganda. It's not fascist. And Christian leftists should not celebrate it. It's this post is saying. So let's keep this in mind about Oberth, because Oberth was close friends with these guys, and he supported their artistic efforts. Many Christian leftists have become fans of Fritz Lang's 1927 film Metropolis for its spiritual and class consciousness themes. It's a very class-conscious movie. On its surface, it's a tale of rebellion and class struggle, with a heroic everyman rising up against the oppressors and bringing the city to its knees. But as with so much of Lang's work, there's more going on beneath the surface. A closer reading of the film shows that it is a strongly fascist message and argues directly against goals of the socialist left. Whatever. Who cares about those goals? but it certainly is Nazi propaganda. It all has to be about the communists. It argues against the holiest of communism. It raises the question, did the Nazis have a point in regard to this version of their self-conception of their ideology? That I'm going to leave for you. I'm not going to answer that question. The screenplay of Metropolis was written by Lang's then wife, Thea von Harbou, based on her own novel of the same name. Von Harbou was an avowed Nazi and a member of the party from 1932 until the end of the war, end of World War II. Her influence on the film's ideology is difficult to overstate. So, and her own writings make it clear that she saw fascism as a means of restoring order and greatness to Germany. As she wrote in a 1933 essay, National Socialism is the political form of the German will to live, to create, and to rule. So she saw Nazism as a means of restoring order and greatness to Germany, and it reflects the German will to live, to create, and to rule. Okay. So Fritz Lang himself joined the Nazi Party in 1934. At one point, Nazi flag flew above the home he shared with Lang and von Harbou. Okay, Lang later fled to Germany. Okay, blah, blah, blah. All right. Boo-hoo-hoo. Not everybody is a communist. We all get called fascists, right? And we all get called Nazis too. It's sort of pointless. Okay, so that's where we got this. There is where we're going to leave off the story. We're not done with Hermann Oberth. We're going to now meet his followers, the men he influenced in Germany. Some of them who are pictured here, and the guy that's pictured there with the rocket that he's holding in his hands is probably the most famous of Oberth's proteges, who came out of the Society for Spaceship Travel as a young man, born years after Oberth, a younger man. But it's going to be the one that everybody is going to associate not only with the German rocket program in the war, but also with America and our rocket program. And this, I'm talking about Wernher von Braun. He's shown here in a photo with Oberth and a bunch of other of Oberth's guys. And there's the V2 rocket. We're going to pick up next week. We're going to do the Warriors next week. Okay, the Warriors. All right, how are we doing? Bear BL, $20. Another good show, Matt. Thank you. You rock. You rock. Show name, Golden Age of the Dorks. That's a good name. Yeah. I'm just old enough as Gen X on the tail end of Boomer where I remember where being a dork was sort of cool. Okay, because it was when we went through an era in the U.S. still early '60s. The slide rule ruled the world, right? So, we believe that. We don't believe that anymore. Of course, there was a day, and this was the golden age of dorks. Yeah. It's hip to be square. Definitely it was. Sammy the Squirrel, $5. Can you do a show about history's greatest mathematicians in the future? Yes, of course. I have on my shelf several books which are Men of Mathematics by E.T. Bell. It's a great book where it just goes through biographies of famous mathematicians like Gauss and etc. So yeah, and they're really good, well written. It's really great writing. Even if you don't need to understand the math. In fact, it'll sort of teach you the math. You'll understand why they did the things they did. So yeah, we'll dig into that sometime. All right, thank you. If you're not a commie, you're a Nazi, Eric Q. Freeman. Yeah, that's about it. That's about right. All right. So thank you, Sammy. Thank you, Sleep State, for $3 in Bitcoin. Yes. Thank you, Keith O'Higgins. First woman on the moon project was renamed Alice Cram. That's my favorite one. My favorite one, Keith O'Higgins. That's brilliant. The Alice Cramden project. Brilliant. Brilliant. Don't let it go to your head, though. Well, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Thank you. Okay. All right. So next, the Warriors we'll do next. And then maybe, who knows where we'll go from this? Because we're only talking about the official one, too. Then there's all the conspiracy theory, right? Who knows where we can go with this? We're going to have fun. All right, so we do need one more sponsor. Tonight's episode of Spellbreakers has been brought to you in part by
He changed his shirt 3 times before he left. Tried on a smile that didn't
Everybody
fit quite
saved.
yet.
Everybody.
Everybody else
Even me?
Especially you.
You mean I just have to use a promo code to get the discount?
Phoebe truly is an idiot.
Hi, fellas. What year is it?
Soft disclosures for everybody.
All right. So thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you, Reberhart, $5. Great show, Matt. Loved reliving my early days in science education. Yeah, yes. I think you're talking about a time when it was more like a golden age of dorks, right? And we're gonna have to get back to golden age of dorks at some point, maybe if we want to pull things out. Okay, or not, Okay, so thumbs up, squish the thumbs. Thank you, Sammy. Thank you. We would appreciate hitting the like button here. Please giving a thumbs up. So, all right. So that's the end of our show tonight, and I'm gonna be on OnlyLands tonight. I've been picked to be on OnlyLands, so I'm gonna be over there, and we're gonna send you over there right here I'm gonna play off the and then we'll do the we will do the raid. That's the word I'm looking for. The raid. Okay, and EC was here. Thank you for the raid. You jumped in with it tonight. We're gonna do the raid. I'm gonna do a playoff, and I will see you guys all next week. Oh, Gart. We've got Gart in Deadwood. Please come. June 25th through 26th. I'm going to be there. Hosts are going to be here. Badlandsmedia.tv/events. Please do come to Gart. Okay, now we're done. We'll play off here. Play him off, keyboard cat.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.